Hello and welcome to the Nation at 5 with me, Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Ladies and gentlemen, ahead of the G20 Summit, we get you a mega Network 18 exclusive where Prime Minister Narendra Modi has spoken to Moneycontrol, highlighting the impact of rising Bharat on the global stage. On the broadcast, we will get you excerpts of that interview where the PM says that India has been advancing the interests of the developing world, including those of nations not represented in the G20, such as the countries of the African Union. He also says that perhaps for the first time in the history of the G20, the Troika consists of representatives from the developing world, that is Indonesia, India and Brazil. The Troika can amplify the voice of the developing world. The Prime Minister has made it clear that India's growth is not only beneficial for Indians, it doesn't only benefit the people of India, but also the people of the world. He says India's growth is characterized by clean and green development. India's growth is being achieved through a human-centric approach that can serve as a model for other countries. India's growth contributes to advancing the interests of the global south. We have followed the approach of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, Sabka Prayas in our country over the last 9 years. This is our guiding principle in global relations as well. So Prime Minister Modi taking that rising India agenda, that rising Bharat agenda, putting it on the front foot ahead of the G20 Summit. I'm joined by my colleagues on the broadcast, Anand Narsimhan, Payal Mehta, as well as Aman Sharma on the broadcast. Anand, I'll come to you first. Prime Minister Modi laying out the narrative of the rising Bharat agenda ahead of the G20 Summit, saying that the Sabka Vikas, Sabka Prayas, Sabka Vishwas agenda is not just for the people of India, but for everyone around the globe.
Well, green growth is what he is focused on, but let's look at the G20. And this interview with Moneycontrol comes at a time that we are just on the cusp of putting out the CNN News 18 G20 town hall. And I'm coming to you just from the sidelines of that venue. It's like a fireside live update. And the Prime Minister so rightly saying that the Troika, that means the previous, current and the next presidency are all with developing nations. So it was Indonesia before us, India the chair now, and we will be passing the baton on to Brazil. And he said that these are the nations that are the voices of the developing world, and we should be able to put forth their cause very strongly. One of the talking points is, will the African Union, a grouping of nearly 55 nations from the continent of Africa, will they all get a permanent G20 presidency like the European Union now has representation in the G20 and a permanent member? This will be the biggest plus, because the case that India has been making very strongly, not just as voice of the global south, but are making an argument that over the next 2 decades, 2/3 of the world's GDP will be contributed by these developing nations, and that's why these nations should have a say in trade norms, in economic policy formation, and even nation to nation engagement. More importantly, the first right over resources, because these are the nations that are going to be the growth engines of the future. Now, there are many nations within the first world who are at least warming up to the thought, but there will be resistance. India now has to play that role of bridging the gaps. It has to become the Vishwamitra. That's the theme of our G20 town hall here at CNN News 18. But more importantly, Prime Minister also underlining that India has shown the developing nations a path that digital infrastructure can be set up to transform via our UPI and other interfaces. We have also said that you can continue to grow while you help the others grow too, with our vaccine Maitri policy. And there are so many other learnings that India is willing to share with these developing nations on how they can actually leapfrog through sustainable development. Green growth is possible, and you can actually jump over those phases, which growth phases, where you consumed a lot of renewables and you burnt a hole in the planet. That's what the first world nations of today did when they were going through this development curve. And we can do that. We can eclipse that. We can jump over, hop over that, and continue to grow at a faster pace. India continues to grow faster than many other nations, and it is poised to grow faster than most other nations across the world in the next decade. That's what the forecasters are saying, and that's what India is saying, that if I can, or if we as a nation can, why can't you? And that's what got the developing nations, the global south is looking up to India as a leader who can be trusted, who is not going to exact its pound of flesh or exploit these developing nations. They've burnt their fingers with China, and that's why India enjoys the trust, and these nations are willing to listen. Ministers after ministers, even the G20 Sherpa and the chief coordinator have said that on the sidelines many nations quietly come and thank India for raising their issues and for talking. And more importantly, the perceptual change that's happened, that India was always seen as a nation who would always be the problem, the hindrance. Today we have become the solver, the solutions provider, that a nation which can get people on the table, sort things out, thrash it out and find a way forward. And I think that role India is assuming brilliantly, and we have displayed that even in this year as the G20 presidency. That's also something the Prime Minister has touched upon, saying that we are becoming the voice of the global south and nations are listening to us. Our time is not on the table anymore, we are at the table.
Absolutely, and it's a narrative that goes along with actions at the same time.